Wizards of the Coast just released a massive announcement for us limited players, and that is that as part of their Alchemy Rebalancing for August, they will be rebalancing cards for draft. This is absolutely what players wanted to see from the Alchemy draft format. There was really not any hint that they were going to be doing this, and so people were a little bit disappointed that maybe they weren't capitalizing on the opportunity that they had to tweak the limited format and improve it and make it a better experience. And I am over the moon to see them make this change. It is going to be really awesome to see. And before I dive into any of the specifics, I just want to say that I think this is the right direction for them to go with an Alchemy set, because that's one of the benefits of a digital only set, is that you can make these tweaks to the cards. And I also want to say that I am really happy to see that they have gone in favor of a improve the bad cards approach rather than a decrease the power level of the good cards approach. This just makes the format more fun overall, more powerful things you can do, instead of just making all of the other cards worse and the format just feel a bit stale. And it's always nice to see some other cards that maybe aren't as good getting improvements rather than just tearing down all of the good cards. With that in mind, let's go to the specific changes and the announcement as a whole. Wizards of the Coast are aiming to make underperforming strategies and archetypes stronger in Alchemy Horizons Baldur's Gate draft. Most of the changes aim to make blocking and other defensive strategies stronger, increasing the toughness of 5 blue creatures, allowing Young Red Dragon to block, and changing a few other cards to make it easier to defend against aggressive decks. This is great to see. They are aware that the format is pretty aggressive, and they are making some improvements, especially helping the blue cards. While we're going through the specific cards, you'll see that a lot of them are blue. Reducing the efficiency of Steadfast Unicorn, Blessed Hippogriff, that's fantastic. Hippogriff is definitely a real problem. And Guildsworn Prowler, also a cool change. We'll be going through them in detail. These are some of the strongest commons that made blocking too difficult. It was too easy to use them while casting other spells on the same turn, so they're just making them a little bit less efficient. And shift it from a strong attacker to a defensive and synergistic card. I really like that change. I think it leads to a lot of interesting decisions. Making additional adjustments to ensure blue is a more viable draft color choice. Thank you. Thank you. That's so awesome to see that they're making this change. Charm Sleeve was poorly positioned, so we redesigned You Come to a River to give the color a more consistent removal spell. Very wise to just kind of shift directions there. And the defensive buff should make it a little bit better. Okay, so let's go to the specific changes now. Dragonborn Looter. It now costs a single mana from costing 2 mana. So a whole mana discount. Getting a 1 mana 1/2 is really nice and just gives blue a little bit of extra oomph in the early turns. That should be a major change, and definitely I expect the card to see a lot more play as a result of costing a full less mana. 1 mana for a 1/2, not generally good enough on its own, but if you add in this looting ability and the fact that it's a dragon, definitely a nice change. Adding an extra toughness to the Pseudo Dragon Familiar, definitely a nice change as well. I'm not sure if the toughness was really the oh my gosh, traffic is just crushing me on my back street home. But yeah, up to a 2/2 from a 2/1. Not sure how big of a shift that's going to be, but it definitely is nice to see a little bit of a buff, because this card is a pretty sweet one. Water Weird. Also not sure how much of a buff this is, but giving it an extra ability can only be positive, and giving it definitely still within the feel of the card, being able to hit for a little bit more damage potentially. Young Blue Dragon being a 3/4 instead of a 3/3. This is a major change because Young Blue Dragon was already one of blue's better commons, and by buffing this, it just makes blue overall a more viable color, because people were already playing pretty much as many Young Blue Dragons as they could get their hands on when they were playing blue, so this is the sort of change that'll really make a difference. Water Weird, I'm less sure on because people weren't really playing that card, but Young Blue Dragon is the sort of card that was getting played, and is so therefore going to have the buff come into play a lot more. And having a 3/4 flyer instead of a 3/3 means you can block things like Hobgoblin Captain and some of the other aggressive creatures that have 3 power. You Come to a River, getting a bit of a redesign. Instead of it being a bounce spell, they have changed it to be a sorcery. It costs an extra mana, but now it is a pretty efficient removal spell, putting it on the top or bottom of their library for just 3 mana. It's going to be important to remember that it is a sorcery now, but I think this is a nice change and gives blue a great removal spell. You Come to a River is now probably one of blue's better commons, because 3 mana to have this effect is actually pretty solid removal. Now, Kenku Artificer, going from a 1/1 to a 1/3, definitely also nice. I'm not sure, again, how much this was getting played, but there are some tools to make this work with Treasure or with Prophetic Prisms or things like that, and so it'll be nice to see now that this card gets a nice toughness boost, because now it's kind of almost a real card on its own. Val, Eager Scholar, getting an extra toughness on both sides. Definitely nice little buff. Allura also getting a toughness boost on each side. Being a 3/3 instead of a 3/2 is really nice, because it just lets you like block the 2/1 double team or a lot of white's 2-drops, or really any aggressive card that's a 2/2. Just all of a sudden you have like a nice stabilization tool. So going from 2 toughness to 3 toughness is a little bit more significant than going from 1 toughness to 2 toughness, in my opinion. Goggles of Night being more efficient to equip, definitely a nice buff. Guildsworn Prowler, I really like this change because now it feels like it's more of a nice card to have in your defensive or sacrifice deck, just like they said, because a 1/1 Death Touch is just a pretty good defensive card, but it's no longer the aggressive threat that it was, where it's like, okay, your opponent's eventually going to have to block this and then you'll draw your card. Now it's mostly like, okay, if you find a way to sacrifice this or use this for some other effect, you're going to get to draw the card, and then otherwise it's just a defensive body. So definitely a major change. Again, some key power toughness shifts, like going from 1 power to 2 power, is a major change. This is Death Touch, so that's not a huge change in terms of creature damage, but dealing 1 damage a turn versus 2 damage a turn drastically reduces the clock. Manticore, 3/1 from 2/1. That's a nice buff as well. Manticore wasn't even that good in Forgotten Realms Limited, and this is a returning card, and so seeing it get a nice little power buff is nice because it means that the flyer is going to be able to trade for more cards on its own, and also just be a little bit of a flying threat and just more playable as a card. So I think this is a nice buff for a card that wasn't seeing a ton of play. Baleful Beholder being a 7/5 instead of a 6/5. I'm not really sure exactly why it gets that buff, but I guess they're just trying to buff the slower cards, and this card maybe was underperforming a bit. Eyes of the Beholder going to 5 mana from 6 mana is a pretty big change because, I mean, every mana counts once you start getting to those higher mana costs. Really, every mana counts just in general. Like the Dragonborn Looter card going from a... the one that we looked at up here, going from 2 mana to 1 mana is a pretty significant change, like of 1 mana. It's like 50% of the mana cost, but even going from 6 to 5 can shave off multiple turns of being able to cast this, because once you get up to 5 or 6 mana, you're not guaranteed to have all of those lands in your opening hand. So like you'll have to draw them and it'll take a few extra turns. So being a 5 mana removal spell, definitely a nice buff. Sigil of Miracle, this card wasn't really played that much, so making it cost less is a good way to maybe have it get played. Young Red Dragon being able to block is also huge because dragon decks oftentimes like being able to have the treasure early, but not being able to block really limited the number of decks this could go into. So this is a nice change as well. The Immolator wasn't played as much, making the activation essentially like 50% more efficient, because now instead of paying 4 mana to get +2/+0, you're paying 3 mana to get +2/+0. A nice little buff as well. The card was kind of clunky before. Making this a 2/1, huge for green decks, being able to slow down the game, and definitely makes this a card that's now like actually playable instead of being a very niche kind of not playable card. And also it's nice because green didn't really have, I guess, as much of a card advantage to drop for those grindier decks, and now it kind of does. Druidic Ritual, also a great change. This was the sort of card where I wouldn't really always want to play it because in the late game you really want to be able to get back 2 creatures, and now you can get back those both creatures. Emerald Dragon loses Trample. You don't really need Trample on flyers as much, but gaining Ward 2 makes it a lot harder for your opponent to just instantly kill that. Nice change in my opinion. Split the Spoils. I'm not sure how big of a change this is because the card itself is kind of a late game card anyway, so the difference in mana might not be as relevant because you kind of have to wait a while to fill your graveyard, but still, any mana reduction is going to be a buff, and so this maybe lets you cast some of the spells that you get from drawing cards with it. And now some of the nerfs. So we've been going through cards that are all purely buffs so far, and I think that it's nice that they did buff so many of these cards. I mean, just scrolling through, look how many of these cards are buffs rather than nerfs, but there were some cards that were a little problematic, and so it's nice to see that they're also taking action against those. Steadfast Unicorn, the real danger with this card is that you could activate it twice in a turn, and I think that this is now going to be significantly harder. It still is probably playable in some decks, but it's significantly worse because getting to 8 mana to double buff was a real thing, and getting to 10 mana is just significantly harder because it takes you a lot of draw steps to get from 8 to 10 mana. And so Steadfast Unicorn, significant nerf, but it was a pretty difficult card to interact with sometimes. And so pretty good change, I think, overall. Makes the format less aggressive, which it was a bit fast before. Blessed Hippogriff, this is also a fantastic change. Having this only cost a single white made it way too easy to hold up. Your opponent could basically never be forced to tap out of their Blessed Hippogriff before, and you never really had an opportunity to just play around it, so they'd always get the 2 for 1, or they'd always blank your make your block bad or whatever. And so now it's like a real cost, so you have some actual counterplay. This is a great change, I think. I like that they're making slight tweaks. They're reducing mana cost by 1. They're adding 1 toughness. They're doing all these little things, and I think that that is the definite direction to go. And then they made some great changes. This is a fantastic change. They made all of the orbs able to tap for any 1 mana of any color, and that just makes it so much better for the dragon decks that want to play 3 colors, because dragon decks oftentimes want to play all 3 colors, red, blue, and green, and the fact that the orbs weren't able to facilitate casting dragons of any color really made them a lot worse. Now you can be giving your dragons haste, scrying 2, or giving them hexproof and a counter, and it's going to actually help fix your mana. So instead of it just being a ramp effect, it now fixes your mana, so it has a dual purpose in the deck instead of just being a kind of niche mana ramp slash like give you a minor upside. So this is a major change, and one that I think really helps the dragon decks, and I think is really nice because these are uncommons, and the fact that you're now kind of excited to get one for your deck is really nice. Because now if I'm playing a blue-green dragons deck and I want to splash red, I can take a Lapis Orb of Dragonkind relatively highly, and I can use it to help splash my red dragons. So pretty nice. It does cast any color for any red splash, but like using it to cast my dragons that are red dragons is pretty awesome. So I think that that is a great change. They note it here. It'll help the decks play all 3 colors more consistently. That's a great change, and it really does make me excited to try playing these cards again, instead of it being like, okay, I see this card, but I can't really play it in my dragons deck because I don't have room for one that does it fix. Lantern of Revealing getting a minor buff. Again, getting even a 1 mana discount on the activated ability is definitely a nice bit of upside, and so makes it easier to activate in the mid game. Navigation Orb costing a little bit less to sacrifice is also a nice buff for those multicolored decks. Anyway, those are all of the changes to the Alchemy cards. I think that this is a major sign of progress for the Alchemy format, and it actually makes me excited to try drafting the format again now that the format is presumably more balanced. There's a lot of new kind of archetypes that maybe can come to the fore and be more playable now that the cards have changed, and I for one am personally very excited by the change. If you did enjoy this video and you want to let me know, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and comment below with your favorite card change in the set. I think personally my favorite change that I found the most satisfying was these orbs, so I would leave hashtag orb changes, and you can leave hashtag whatever changes you like. I also like hippogriff changes because for anyone that watched any of my Alchemy content, you'll know that this card was kind of the bane of my existence, always blowing me out. Anyway, that is going to do it for this video. I really do hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you next time.